The first thing I noticed was how quiet the house felt once I stopped answering his calls. Not peaceful, not calm, just hollow, like a sound had been removed but the echo still lingered. For years, that sound had been my brother's voice, loud, certain, always filling the room even when he wasn't there. Now the silence felt like a consequence everyone was waiting for me to undo. I didn't plan to cut him off. I didn't wake up one day and decide I was done with my family. What I did was finally say out loud what everyone else kept pretending wasn't happening. And apparently, that was worse. My brother had always been the center of our family's gravity. The loudest opinions, the sharpest jokes, the one who could insult you and make everyone laugh, then act offended if you didn't laugh along. Growing up, I learned early that keeping the peace meant staying quiet. If he crossed a line, it was brushed off. That's just how he is. He doesn't mean it. You're too sensitive. I carried those phrases with me into adulthood. Family dinners became exercises in endurance. Comments about my life choices, my boundaries, my relationships, always disguised as jokes, always delivered with a smile. And if I pushed back even gently, the room would shift. I became the problem, the one making things uncomfortable. The moment everything broke wasn't dramatic. It was a casual remark at a family gathering. My brother made a comment about my career, something cutting and dismissive, followed by laughter from a few relatives who didn't want to be next. Something in me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. "Why do you think it's okay to talk to me like that?" I asked. The room went silent. My brother blinked, genuinely surprised. "Relax, it's a joke." "It's not a joke if I'm the only one being laughed at," I said. "It's a pattern." My mother immediately stepped in. "This isn't the time." My brother smirked. "See, you always do this. You turn nothing into drama." And that's when I said it. Calmly, clearly, "This family is toxic, and we all enable it. Especially you." You could have heard a pin drop. My brother laughed, but it was sharp, defensive. "Oh, here we go. Therapy talk." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him back. I simply listed things. Years of belittling comments. The way disagreements always turned into attacks. The way accountability never applied to him. "You don't get to hurt people and hide behind that's just how I am," I said. "And I'm done pretending it's normal." He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "If you don't like it here, then don't come," he snapped. Something settled inside me. "Okay," I said. I left shortly after. No shouting, no scene, just a quiet exit that somehow felt louder than any argument would ever had. The fallout came quickly. My phone filled with messages, not asking if I was okay, not asking what had led me there, just variations of the same theme. Apologize, be the bigger person, keep the family together. My brother sent one message, just one. "Don't talk to me until you learn some respect." I never replied. Weeks passed, then months. Family events happened without me. I heard about them secondhand. I was labeled difficult, dramatic, divisive. My absence became proof to them that I had always been the problem. And still, no one asked why it had taken me so long to speak up. The hardest part wasn't missing my brother. It was realizing that the family only valued harmony when it came at my expense. One night, my mother called, her voice tired. "He's still angry," she said. "You know how he is." "Yes," I replied. "That's the problem." She sighed. "You didn't have to cut him off." "I didn't cut him off," I said. "I stopped accepting disrespect." There was a long pause. "Families don't work like that," she finally said. "Then maybe that's why this one hurts so much," I answered. I didn't block my brother. I didn't issue ultimatums. I simply stopped engaging. No explanations, no defenses, just distance. And something unexpected happened. I felt lighter, not happy, not relieved, but no longer braced. No longer rehearsing responses in my head before every interaction. No longer shrinking to keep others comfortable. Months later, my brother tried to reach out. A neutral message. No apology. Just an attempt to reset without addressing anything. I didn't respond. Because reconciliation without accountability isn't peace, it's surrender. Sometimes I wonder if I should have handled it differently. If I should have chosen silence instead of confrontation. If calling out the toxicity was worth losing my place in the family. But then I remember how it felt to finally say the truth truth without shaking, and I ask myself the only question that matters. Was I really the asshole for refusing to be the family punching bag anymore? Or was I just the first one brave enough to stop playing my assigned role? The months that followed taught me how deeply silence can rearrange a life. At first, I kept expecting something to happen, a confrontation, an apology, a dramatic moment where everything finally cracked open. Instead, there was just nothing. Birthdays passed without messages. Holidays came and went with carefully staged photos posted online, and my absence cropped out as if I had never existed in the frame. What surprised me most was how quickly the narrative changed without me there to correct it. I became the sensitive one, the one who overreacted, the one who thinks she's better than everyone else now. No one mentioned the comments that led to it. No one mentioned the years of swallowing discomfort to keep things smooth. My boundary was easier to criticize than his behavior. I started noticing how often people asked me to reconsider, not because they missed me, but because my absence made things inconvenient. Family events were harder to plan. Conversations felt uneven. Someone had to sit in the empty space I'd left behind, and they didn't like how visible it was. An aunt told me, "Your brother hasn't been himself lately." I almost laughed. He had always been himself. The difference was that he no longer had me there to absorb the impact. The guilt came in waves. Some days I felt steady, grounded in my decision. Other days I woke up with a tight chest, wondering if I'd confused self-respect with stubbornness. I replayed the moment at that table over and over, examining my tone, my wording, the timing. Could I have waited? Could I have said it privately? Could I have softened it just enough to keep my place? But every version of softer ended the same way, with me swallowing something sharp. I started therapy during that time, not because I doubted my choice, but because I needed help understanding why it hurts so much to do the right thing for myself. What happens if you go back? My therapist asked one day. I pictured it instantly. The jokes, the tension, the unspoken expectation that I'd learned my lesson. I disappear, I said, quietly. And what happens if you don't? I thought about the loneliness, the holidays alone, the looks from relatives who thought blood should outweigh behavior. I stay visible, I answered, but alone. She nodded. That's the trade-off. The trade-off didn't get easier, but it got clearer. One evening, almost a year after everything happened, my brother showed up at my door unannounced. I froze when I saw him through the peephole, older, familiar, still carrying the same posture that once made me feel small. I opened the door anyway. He didn't apologize. He didn't even greet me properly. "So this is it?" he asked. "You're just done with your own family?" "I'm done being disrespected," I said calmly. He scoffed. "You always make yourself the victim." "I'm not a victim," I replied. "I'm someone who set a boundary you didn't like." He stepped closer. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said. "I think I deserve basic respect." That word again, respect. It seemed to irritate him more than anything else. "You want an apology?" he asked. "Fine. Sorry you can't take a joke." My stomach sank, not because I expected more, but because a small part of me had still hoped. "That's not accountability," I said. "That's dismissal." He shook his head. "You've changed." "Yes," I answered, because I had to. The conversation ended where it began, without resolution. He left angry. I closed the door, shaking, not from fear, but from the final confirmation that the brother I wanted didn't exist. After that, something shifted. I stopped waiting. I stopped imagining future versions of him who would suddenly understand. I stopped translating his behavior into something more tolerable. I accepted what was, not what I wished it could be. And in that acceptance, grief finally surfaced, not loud or dramatic, but heavy and real. I grieved the sibling bond I thought we had. I grieved the family dynamic I'd tried so hard to preserve. I grieved the version of myself who believed love meant endurance. But grief, unlike guilt, eventually moves. Slowly, my life expanded into the space he once occupied. Friendships deepened. My home felt calmer. I laughed without bracing myself for a punchline that would land on my ribs. I learned something no one in my family had ever taught me. Love that requires silence is not love. Connection that depends on self-erasure is not connection. I don't know if my brother will ever change. I don't know if my family will ever acknowledge the pattern instead of protecting it. But I do know this. Calling out toxicity didn't break my my family. It revealed it. And choosing distance wasn't abandonment. It was survival. If that makes me the asshole in their story, then so be it. I finally stopped living in a story where I was only allowed to exist quietly. Time kept moving, even when parts of me felt stuck in the aftermath. The longer I stayed out of the family orbit, the more clearly I began to see how deeply the dynamic had shaped me. I noticed it in small, uncomfortable ways. How I instinctively softened my opinions in group settings. How I laughed too quickly after saying something honest, as if bracing for backlash. How silence still felt safer than disagreement, even among people who had never hurt me. Distance didn't erase the damage, but it finally gave me space to examine it. I started remembering things I'd normalized for years. Moments I'd brushed aside because confronting them felt pointless. My brother interrupting me mid-sentence, then mocking me for getting emotional when I tried to finish. Family members watching it happen, eyes sliding away, relieved it wasn't aimed at them. Apologies that were really just resets, offered without change and accepted out of fatigue. I realized something that unsettled me more than anger ever had. I had been trained to tolerate disrespect and call it love. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. A year and a half after I stopped speaking to my brother, a cousin reached out. Someone neutral. Someone who had always stayed on the edges of family conflict. I didn't understand before, she admitted, but now has doing it to me. That message sat heavy in my chest. Not vindication, not relief, just sadness. I'm sorry, I replied. It's not easy to be on the other side. She asked how I handled it, how I stayed firm without losing myself to guilt. I told her the truth. You don't stay firm all the time. You just stop abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. Around that time, my mother tried again. She invited me to lunch, alone, without telling my brother. Her voice was cautious when she asked, like she already knew this wasn't a conversation she could control. She looked older when we sat down, not just physically tired in a way that comes from holding contradictions too long. He says you think he's a monster, she said quietly. I don't think he's a monster, I replied. I think he's unwilling to look at himself. She sighed. He doesn't understand why this can't just go back to normal. I met her eyes. Because normal was hurting me. She nodded slowly, but I could see the conflict still alive behind her gaze. Accepting my boundary meant accepting her role in maintaining the dynamic. That was a truth she wasn't ready to hold fully. Families forgive, she said finally. Families also change, I answered. Or they lose people. She didn't argue. That felt like progress. After that lunch, I stopped hoping for a dramatic reckoning. No big apology. No emotional breakthrough where everyone suddenly understood. That kind of ending belonged to stories, not real life. Real life offered something quieter. My brother's name came up less, then hardly at all. My family learned how to speak around the absence, even if they never named it. I became a peripheral figure, invited sometimes, excluded other times, always slightly out of sync, and yet my life felt fuller than it had in years. I noticed how calm my body felt during holidays, how conversations didn't leave me replaying every word afterward, how I no longer felt the need to prove my worth by being agreeable. I wasn't healed, but I was no longer bleeding. Occasionally, doubt still surfaced. On birthdays, on family anniversaries, on days when nostalgia painted the past in kinder colors than it deserved. Was it worth it? Was the cost too high? Then I remembered the version of myself who sat silently at tables, shrinking to avoid becoming a target. The version who mistook endurance for maturity. The version who believed love meant staying, no matter the cost. And I understood something fundamental. Staying would have cost me more. I didn't stop speaking to my brother because I wanted distance. I did it because closeness without respect was destroying me. Calling out the toxicity wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of self-recognition. One chose myself in a family that only valued me when I was quiet. And even now, even with the grief and the unanswered questions, I know this much is true. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It made me honest. And honesty, once claimed, is something you never truly lose again. With time, the absence stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a boundary that had finally healed enough to hold its shape. That didn't mean everything suddenly made sense. It meant I stopped forcing meaning where there wasn't any. I noticed it most when new people entered my life. Friends, co-workers, even casual acquaintances. When conversations drifted toward family, I no longer felt the urge to edit myself into something more acceptable. I didn't rush to soften the truth or wrap it in humor. I don't speak to my brother, I'd say calmly if it came up. Sometimes people nodded and moved on. Sometimes they asked questions. And sometimes they reacted the way my family always had. But he's still your brother. That sentence used to make my chest tighten. Now it just sounded incomplete. I learned that a lot of people confuse biology with entitlement, as if shared DNA grants permanent access no matter the cost, as if enduring harm is a moral requirement, not a warning sign. The further I got from the situation, the more clearly I could see how long I'd been preparing for that moment without realizing it. Every time I swallowed a comment, every time I laughed something off that hurt, every time I told myself it wasn't that bad. It hadn't been one decision. It had been a slow accumulation, and once the weight crossed a certain point, silence stopped being an option. One evening, years later, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was my brother. No anger, no accusation, just a short message. Mom says you won't come if I'm there. Is that really how it is now? I stared at the screen for a long time. I thought about how much effort it had taken to get here, how much grief I'd already processed, how much peace I'd built without him. Yes, I finally replied. That's how it is. There was no immediate response. When one came, it was predictable. So you're punishing me forever. I didn't argue. In protecting myself, I wrote, those aren't the same thing. He didn't answer after that. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain further. That was when I realized something important had shifted. I no longer needed him to understand. For a long time, I thought closure meant mutual recognition, an apology, a conversation where he finally saw the damage had caused and acknowledged it without deflection. But closure, it turns out, can be unilateral. It can look like acceptance without agreement, peace without permission. My family never fully came around. Some adjusted quietly. Others continued to frame the situation as a sad misunderstanding instead of what it actually was. But their opinions stopped carrying the weight they once did. I had already paid the price of honesty. I wasn't willing to pay it again just to make them more comfortable. What surprised me most, though, was how much compassion I eventually felt for myself, and even for him. Not the kind that invites him back into my life, the kind that understands without excusing. I could see now how deeply insecurity fueled his behavior, how much of his cruelty was armor, how the family had rewarded dominance and punished vulnerability, shaping him long before I ever confronted him. Understanding that didn't change the outcome, but it freed me from bitterness. I no longer needed to prove that he was wrong. I only needed to remember why I left. There are days I miss the idea of a brother, the version of siblinghood I hoped for but never had. I let myself grieve that now without pretending it was something I lost recently. It was something I never truly had to begin with, and that realization, painful as it was, became grounding, because you can't lose what never existed in a healthy form. I don't know how my family tells the story now. I imagine I'm still framed as difficult, too sensitive, the one who couldn't let things go. Maybe that's true. I couldn't let go of my dignity. I couldn't let go of my sense of self. I couldn't let go of the quiet knowledge that staying silent was slowly erasing me. If that makes me the villain in their version, I've learned to live with it. Because in my own story, I finally stopped disappearing. And that, more than anything, tells me I made the right choice. Eventually, the story stopped demanding more from me. There were no final confrontations, no grand realizations, just a slow settling into a life that no longer revolved around managing someone else's behavior or protecting a family image at my own expense. I stopped waiting for my brother to change. I stopped hoping my family would name what they'd spent years avoiding. I stopped measuring my healing by whether anyone else understood it. The distance remained quiet and firm, and over time it stopped feeling like loss and started feeling like relief. I learned that walking away doesn't always mean anger. Sometimes it means clarity. Sometimes it means choosing peace over proximity. I didn't destroy my family by speaking the truth. I revealed the cost of keeping silent. And when I finally accepted that some people would rather lose me than change, I stopped trying to prove my worth to them. The story didn't end with forgiveness or reconciliation. It ended with something simpler. One chose myself.